Detroit is directed by Kathryn Bigelow and stars Will Poulter, John Boyega, Anthony Mackie and Jack Reynor, along with a few other people, and is about the 1960s race riots that took place in Detroit, but more specifically a certain event known as the Algee's motel situation that happened during those riots. Now, I was really intrigued by this movie because I do like Kathryn Bigelow as a director. I really like The Hurt Locker, and even though I do think Zero Dark 30 is a bit too long of a movie, I do really like it as a movie as well, which is why I was really excited for Detroit, because it carries on that realistic, actual event style of movie she's been doing for the last couple of years. And I was interested to see this movie because of the performances and that. And also, I didn't really know much about this event. I knew that the race riots in Detroit were a thing, but certain events like the Algee's motel situation, I had no idea about. So this movie, I thought was going to be a very eye-opening movie, and it was, because it really did open my eyes as to what actually happened and the brutality of what happened and why it was such an awful thing. First up, I have to talk about the performances, because in my opinion the performances in this movie are the thing that drive it forward. Without the great performances, this movie would just be shit. But luckily, everyone is on top form. Anthony Mackie, I thought for what his role was there for, I thought he was very good in his role. Jack Reynor I thought was pretty good as well, especially coming off of films like Sing Street and Free Fire. I thought he was very good here. But the two standouts were John Boyega and Will Poulter. John Boyega plays a somewhat innocent kind of security guard who's stuck in the middle of this situation, and I thought he was really good in this movie. I thought he added a bit more of a humanised aspect to this whole event. Kind of like an innocent bystander, but he isn't really a bystander. He's stuck in the middle of this situation. I thought he was very good. But easily, the person who stole every scene he was in was Will Poulter, as the leader of the three cops who were in charge of this Algee's motel situation. And he's one of the most racist cops I've ever seen in a movie. And seeing the fact that his character is based off of an actual person is disgusting, and it just goes to show how good of a job Will Poulter did, because there are times where you kind of can trust him, but then there are other times where he is one of the most vile people possible, and he constantly uses the line, "I'm just doing my job, this is what you're supposed to do as a policeman," when you know what he's doing is morally fucked up in every sense of the word. And all of these great performances are backed up by some solid direction by Kathryn Bigelow. I do think Hurt Locker is the better directed movie out of the three recent ones she's done, but I do think she does a great job here for what it's worth. For such a horrific and crucial event, she manages to capture as much brutality out of it as possible in the best way possible. And the fact that she hones in on this single situation kind of makes everything a lot more tense and just that a lot more believable. I also thought the way the story panned out was very interesting as well, and worked really well for the movie. They follow a very strong 3-act structure and stick to it as best as possible. The first part of the movie focuses on how the riots started and what actually happened during the riots. Then the middle of the movie, and what takes up the majority of the runtime, is that Algee's event and kind of showing how fucked up of a situation it was. And then that final act is the court case that followed that event and what happened to the people involved. And I really like the way they did that, because rather than kind of mishmashing bits of the riots in with that event, you kind of know what's happening. You have the riots, you have the event, then you have the aftermath of the event, which makes it very easy to follow. And in a movie like this, you don't really want it to be too complicated. So the fact that it's that easy to follow kind of helps with drawing you into the situation. One thing I really liked about Kathryn Bigelow's direction is that it feels like you're watching these events happen right in front of you. If anything, the film plays out more like a documentary than an actual drama. And I don't just mean that in the way it's filmed, I mean that in terms of the way the whole movie feels. It feels and presents itself a lot more like a documentary than anything else, and it really does add to the realism of the situation, along with the incredibly well realised setting and aesthetic of the whole movie as well. Now, I don't think this movie's perfect, and there are a couple things holding it back from being a really great movie. The first of them being the camera work. Now, for the most part, like I said, it does add to the believability and brutality of the situation, and it really does work for the sake of the movie. But there are quite a few times where they go a little bit over the top with the shaky cam and you can't actually tell what's going on. There were some times where I just wanted them to hold the camera steady and stop shaking them. Like, there's a moment near the start of the movie where the camera is following John Boyega's character down the street, and it just feels like they were not using a steady cam at all and literally were filming it with their hands. It was all over the place, and I'm like, that is one simple shot that you can just do with a steady cam, so why not use a steady cam? Even though there were some really bad moments of shaky cam, I will say that overall I was still thoroughly invested with the movie. However, the only other problem I have is that I feel that they could have easily cut about 10 to 15 minutes off of the runtime. And I completely understand that they have to show the court case that happened afterwards, because I really did find that aspect of the movie just as interesting as the past 2 acts. But I just feel like it went on for a little bit too long and they could have cut it a little bit sooner. By the time it was nearing the end, it felt like it was just dragging out for no reason, so I feel like they could have cut a few minutes off of the runtime. Apart from that though, I do still highly recommend Detroit. It is a very hard-hitting drama that is handled in the most believable and horrific way possible, but it kind of has to for the event they're depicting. And I'm going to give Detroit an 8 out of 10. Kathryn Bigelow has made another really, really good movie, but like I said, I do think The Hurt Locker is a little bit better. So guys, that was my review for Detroit. I hope you enjoyed it. If my voice sounds a little bit funny, it's because I'm just trying to get over a cold at the moment. So, yeah, I apologise if my voice doesn't sound as good as usual. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.